This week on Government Matters.
When they say, I'm immature in this particular area, can go to this repository and find proven practices, techniques, in order to help them get to that maturity faster.
ACT-IAC releases the IT Management Maturity Model. Will it help FITARA avoid the same fate as Klinger-Cohen?
The big challenge for NIST and for the FBI is going to be to develop some capability to make up for the parts that are missing in Touchless.
Touchless fingerprint readers represent the next frontier in biometrics. We break down the pros and cons of that emerging tech.
I'm not sure necessarily their competitors will be different, but I think the CSC-SRA combination will be a tougher competitor.
It's arguably the biggest M&A deal of the summer. Government Matters starts right now.
From ABC 7 and News Channel 8, this is Government Matters.
To our viewers around the world on the American Forces Network and here in the nation's capital, thanks for joining us. Government is the engine that runs this city. That's why Government Matters. Every week we'll bring you the top headlines in tech, security, and management. I'm your host, Morris Jones. A new poll conducted by Wakefield Research for PKWare finds Hillary Clinton as the most qualified candidate to protect the U.S. from cyber attacks. She beat Donald Trump in that category 42 to 24%. The cyber vote of confidence comes as Clinton continues to face scrutiny over the private email server she used as Secretary of State. Brianna Keeler has more.
Hillary Clinton offered a full apology for the controversy surrounding her email.
That was a mistake. I'm sorry about that. I take responsibility. And I'm trying to be as transparent as I possibly can.
She put it on Facebook as well, a mea culpa she has resisted for months, since March when she first addressed her emails.
The server will remain private.
In July, as more voters questioned her trustworthiness.
I can only tell you, Brianna, that this has been a theme that has been used against me and my husband for many, many years.
And in August, even after turning her server wiped of emails over to the FBI.
What, like with a cloth or something? Nobody talks to me about it other than you guys.
Clinton edged closer to an apology last week, but didn't quite get there.
I am sorry that this has been confusing to people and has raised a lot of questions.
Then Tuesday, one day after telling the Associated Press she had no reason to apologize, she finally did, repeatedly admitting mistakes.
I do think I could have and should have done a better job answering questions earlier. I really didn't perhaps appreciate the need to do that.
Clinton is trying to move past the focus on her email as she addresses other issues like her support for the Iran nuclear deal.
Either we move forward on the path of diplomacy and seize this chance to block Iran's path to a nuclear weapon, or we turn down a more dangerous path leading to a far less certain and riskier future.
But she warned against trusting Iran.
You remember President Reagan's line about the Soviets, trust but verify. My approach will be distrust and verify.
Even as she addressed a serious topic today, she had some lighter moments, laughing off a coughing fit as she delivered a political jab.
My voice, I'm suffering under massive allergy assault. Yes, Republican histamines are everywhere.
Brianna Keeler reporting. President Obama continues to target the contracting community to spur changes in the labor movement. On Labor Day, he signed an executive order that forces federal contractors to give paid sick leave to their employees. Now those workers will earn 1 hour of leave for every 30 hours on the job. That amounts to as many as 7 days of paid leave per year. September is National Preparedness Month, a time when federal agencies encourage citizens to make a plan for natural disasters. FEMA, NOAA, and NGA contribute to the disaster response with help from satellite technology. The private sector does too, as Diane Cho reports.
After a natural disaster, seconds can make all the difference in the world, especially for emergency responders. If landlines or cell phones go down, satellites provide one more means of communication. 3 years ago, Hughes Network Systems stepped in to help after Hurricane Sandy crashed into the East Coast.
The infrastructure of the terrestrial providers was either underground or on the first floor of their facilities and were quickly submerged and rendered inoperable. Really, the only things that worked in these two instances, Sandy and Katrina, was satellite.
When it comes to public safety, he says the company's Spaceway satellite improved upon its predecessors, overcoming vulnerabilities that existed in the past caused by heavy rain.
The Spaceway satellite is a router in the sky. No middle hub on the ground or terrestrial backhaul is needed. It's dish to dish. It's direct point-to-point connectivity. It's faster. It's made for data transmission.
The ability to see a potential weather threat before it makes landfall is where the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration comes in.
Satellites are literally our eyes in the sky. They are constantly scanning the globe.
Chris Vaccaro with NOAA says satellites are critical to a weather forecast, helping meteorologists project weather conditions hours, days, or even weeks in advance. He says satellites account for about 90% of the data fed into forecast models.
In a huge ocean like this, we just have a few buoys or a couple of weather observation sites in the Caribbean or the Bahamas and maybe a few ships. But there's gapping data holes in between that, and the satellite helps to fill that gap, and it provides a sweeping overview of what the current conditions are in the atmosphere.
For Government Matters, I'm Diane Cho.
Let's take a look now at names making news. After 15 years at the helm, Stan Soloway will step down as president and CEO of the Professional Services Council. Soloway called it a difficult decision, but indicated it might be time to do something different before he retires. BlackBerry, still the favorite mobile device for many feds, made a big acquisition this week. It paid $425 million in cash for a company called Good Technology. BlackBerry says the deal will enhance application security and privacy on their devices. Siemens Government Technologies has named a new chief operating officer. Barbara Humpton joined SGT in 2011 after stints at Lockheed Martin and Booz Allen Hamilton. In Tech Matters, the next phase for FITARA, the Federal IT Acquisition Reform Act. President Obama signed that bill into law last December to improve the way government buys and manages technology. Public and private sector supporters say they're determined to help this law reach its potential and avoid the mistakes of its predecessor, Klinger-Cohen. ACT-IAC convened government and industry to do just that. Now phase one of their ambitious FITARA project is complete. Joining me, Industry Chairman Richard Spires, CEO of Resilient Network Systems, and Project Manager Stephen Holden of Octo Consulting. Richard, let's start with the basics. What is the IT management maturity model? Break it down for us.
Well, Morris, the idea here is to talk about what does IT management maturity look like within the federal government. And we believe that many agencies are struggling, frankly, to manage IT effectively. And so we've worked closely, 50 people coming together from industry and government in order to break down and lay out a maturity model along 5 different lanes so that agencies can use this to both assess where they're at in the maturity across these 5 functions, but also tell them what it is they need to put in place to mature in each of those 5.
And Stephen, agencies submitted their own FITARA implementation plans on August 15th. How will those be factored in?
We're hopeful that agencies will use the tool that Richard just talked about as a way to compare themselves to the self-assessments that they just provided to OMB. And in some cases, if they put together improvement plans to improve their maturity, they can essentially find themselves in our maturity model, see where they've either achieved maturity, hopefully, or in cases where they have improvements to make, they can use our model as a way to give them a roadmap to improve how they manage their IT.
Now, I'm finding that maturity is one of the key words in this discussion, and also, Richard, agile development looms large in your model. Is the waterfall approach living on borrowed time?
Well, I think that's a fair statement, although you need to be careful because there are certain kinds of IT programs, particularly infrastructure builds, that necessarily don't lend themselves to agile. But when it comes to actually software development or deployment, Clearly, agile is the way to go today, incremental, because you want to get that customer feedback. You want to deliver things, get feedback, and then from there improve. And that's just standard best practice in software development today.
Stephen, I'd like to talk about your team's relationship with OMB. Are you pro bono consultants? How often do you meet, and what kind of authority does this framework have?
Good questions, Morris. You know, Act is one of the premier public-private partnerships in the federal IT space. So we oftentimes work with OMB on projects like this. Folks are volunteering their time. As Richard said, we have 50 volunteers. We also have a steering committee that's been brought together of very influential both public and private sector CIOs, CFOs, and folks who have done human resources as well. You know, I think like most of our products that Act puts together, they're advisory. They are there to be helpful tools for agencies or other stakeholders who want to take advantage of them.
Okay, on to phase 2, Richard. What does that entail?
Well, phase 1, the maturity model, is really about the what. Okay, what's it look like to be mature? Where phase 2 is really, to me, the most important part. It's the how, which is practices, processes, tool sets, policy statements that already exist, whether they be in the federal government and being used, or whether they be in commercial sector, that are proven to work. And what we're really embarking on is in the 5 areas of the maturity model around governance, budgeting, acquisition, workforce, and program management, that we're going to look across the federal landscape as well as into the private sector to find these proven practices, be able to gather them, and have a repository, if you will, so that agencies, when they say, I'm immature in this particular area, can go to this repository and find proven practices, techniques, in order to help them get to that maturity faster. That's what this is really all about.
And Stephen, before we go, have either one of you met with Tony Scott about the maturity model?
We've had a number of conversations with a number of stakeholders. We've been in consultation with OMB, and we're looking forward to working with them as we get ready to roll out the maturity framework and as agencies get their feedback from OMB in the future.
Meantime, Stephen Holden and Richard Spires, thanks for being with us.
Thank you, Morris.
Thank you.
We'll turn from tech to security straight ahead on Government Matters. New technology could make the classic fingerprint a thing of the past. We discuss the pros and cons of touchless fingerprint readers next. In Security Matters, the marketplace for touchless fingerprint readers. This month, NIST, the National Institute of Standards and Technology, released an update on its research with the FBI. They're working together to develop a set of common requirements, metrics, and open testing. The goal is to land qualified new tech on the government-certified products list. Joining me with more is Robert Bigman, founder of 2B Secure and former Chief Information Security Officer at the CIA. Bob, let's start with some of the potential benefits to touchless fingerprint readers. How do they compare to contact-based fingerprints?
Well, so the good news is it certainly helps the hygienically challenged among us, in which you don't have to actually touch anything anymore. The idea would be that contactless can actually pick up your fingerprint ID from a distance using some combination of IR and other types of collection mechanisms.
Now, let's get to some of the concerns like cybersecurity. Since July, we've covered the OPM data breach nearly every week. Once again, it serves as a cautionary tale. 1.1 million fingerprints stolen. Now, what about touchless readers, Bob? Do you have any security concerns there?
Absolutely. The big challenge for NIST and for the FBI is going to be to develop some capability to make up for the parts that are missing in touchless. And what happens is traditionally biometrics with fingers pick up just not the fingerprint scan portion of your fingerprint. It also picks up things like pressure and heat. You won't obviously have that, or have a harder time being able to get that in the contact list. So they're either going to have to substitute other measures or become very good at being able to capture those important aspects of the ability to measure biometrics.
Now, can all of this data be encrypted? That would be important.
Well, yeah, it'd be wonderful if all the data can be encrypted, but there's 1,000 reasons why it can be. And to be honest with you, encryption by itself, while a valuable tool, has to go hand in glove with more secure systems. To be honest with you, hackers don't really worry a whole lot about encrypted data because they attack the data when it's unencrypted inside the computer systems and being used by the users. They almost never really attack it in its encrypted form. That's simply too difficult.
No, good point. NIST researchers are working with a handful of private sector partners like Morphotrack LLC and 3M Company. They say it's difficult to get tech developers to address these issues independently. Now, Morphotrack is part of Safran, a company that does biometric work in all the states and many federal agencies. Do they have too much clout in this arena?
I can't address whether they have too much or not enough clout. I think the problem is there's never been a large inertia towards the biometric fingerprint business. It's more, understand that it's a lot more difficult than just coming up with a scanner. It seems at face value to be fairly straightforward, but it's fairly complicated when you understand how to securely digitize the fingerprint, how to movement and validate it between the fingerprint reader and the computer, and keep it secure in transmission all the way back to the back-end database. A lot of companies have stayed away from this technology because of the complications, not in the actual scanning technology, but in the security of the overall application.
NIST says it's also testing whether or not touchless fingerprint readers can work with legacy systems in government. You've done a lot of work in that arena. Is it possible?
Yeah, I think it's possible. You know, you have the user acceptance issue with traditional systems. You know, where do you interface, how do you interface, and how do you use it? The other problem is you almost always have to use the vendors, what they call APIs, application programming interfaces. And although there are some specific standards used for specifically biometrics and fingerprints, I don't see a lot of the big vendors, including Microsoft, at this point really committing to not just implementing, but supporting them in the long run.
Robert Bigman, founder of 2B Secure. Thanks for being with us.
Sure, thank you.
We'll turn from security to management straight ahead on Government Matters. Speculation on the future of Computer Sciences Corporation is now a thing of the past. Inside on an M&A deal that will reshape the federal IT marketplace. Next. In Management Matters, CSC and SRA. It's arguably the biggest M&A deal of the summer. Here to break it down is Nick Wakeman, Editor-in-Chief of Washington Technology. Nick, give us the nuts and bolts of this deal.
Yeah, CSC and SRA are two companies with long histories and legacies in the federal market. And CSC is buying SRA. They're spending about $390 million in cash that'll go to SRA shareholders, and then they're also assuming about $1 billion in SRA debt. And at the end, it'll create a company with $5.5 billion in annual revenue and 19,000 employees, and they'll have, you know, scale and capabilities that neither company had before, and they'll really be ready to kind of go after some new opportunities in the market.
Now, there was a lot of speculation about the future of Computer Sciences Corporation. Not anymore. You write, the acquisition of SRA also should dispel the rumors that CSC was splitting off its government business to make it an easier takeover target for other buyers. Now, you use the word acquisition. Some called it a merger. Which one is it?
Well, you know, the companies want to talk about it as a merger, but really it is an acquisition. I mean, some SRA shareholders will retain some equity in the company, but it's really only 15%. CSC shareholders will own, you know, 85%. And CSC is paying the $390 million to buy the company. But when you look at it another way, more I think from like the cultural aspect of it, that's where you may see a merger. I mean, both companies have, you know, best practices. They have good leadership. The new name of the company, because CSC is splitting itself, and the commercial business will be known as CSC. So there'll be a new name for this new entity. And they've been telling me that it's going to take the kind of the legacy of both, that you'll be able to see this new name and see some of CSC and SRA. So I think on sort of those softer issues of the culture and philosophy, it may be a merger, but really financially it's a takeover with CSC, you know, buying SRA.
Now, Nick, you mentioned this split will be complete in November. They're not the first public sector business to take that approach. How does the SRA acquisition factor in here? Who are they going after?
Well, I think, on the competitive landscape, I'm not sure necessarily their competitors will be different, but I think the CSC SRA combination will be a tougher competitor. They'll have, each company brings with it, certain strengths and capabilities. SRA, they've told me has very strong business development. CSC is better at winning the larger larger opportunities. So I think you'll see them positioned, to be more competitive in the marketplace. And you also have to remember that some companies, particularly Lockheed, is kind of pulling out of this IT services space. So CSC is making the argument they're going to be the largest pure play IT services company in the market.
Now, this is a pretty unique deal by M&A standards. It was driven by scale rather than cost savings. Explain that for us.
Yeah, it's really pretty interesting because you have to think about both of these companies 3 and 4 years ago were at the start of turnaround phases in their history. They were really struggling quite a bit, so both of them have focused a lot on taking out costs, becoming more efficient. They've been investing in new technologies, but that cost efficiency really shows itself in this merger. They're creating a $5.5 billion company, but they say they've only found $51 million in savings, which tells me that they've done about as much as they can do as far as getting more cost effective and efficient. Sure, we'll see some back office things go away and some real estate consolidations, but really this deal is about being, getting the scale and being more about growth and pushing out into new areas for both of these companies.
It's good to get the latest from you. Nick Wakeman, Editor-in-Chief of Washington Technology. Thanks, Nick.
Thank you.
Keep it right here. We'll turn from management to final matters straight ahead. It appears to be official. The former fugitive and antivirus creator John McAfee is running for president. He filed paperwork with the FEC, set up a campaign website, and released an official video. Here's an excerpt.
I live in a country that is governed by people largely illiterate in cybersecurity, as proven by the multiple government computer hacks.
McAfee plans to run as an independent. And that's the latest from Washington. Thanks for watching. I'm Morris Jones. We know your week is filled with other matters. Save this half hour for us.